Welcome, all of you, to episode number 2 of the podcast. I have decided that I will stick with the name Creator Journals. And if this is your first time here, Creator Journals is a podcast on the story behind creators' uprising. On that note, I'd like to introduce our second guest, Ali Abdaal. Thanks for coming on the episode.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
So, right now you have 140,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I see you've been on YouTube since 2007. When did you start making videos, and what were they about in the beginning?
Damn, since 2007, that's a long time. Um, I think I started YouTube properly in July 2017, but before then I'd kind of dabbled with a few music videos, things like that. Because
Mhm.
when I joined YouTube in 2007, pretty much the only thing I used to watch, apart from, those viral videos, was people doing acoustic covers of popular songs. So people like Kurt Schneider, Sam Tsui, and that was like my intro to YouTube. So for ages, I always wanted to be that kind of musical YouTuber where you kind of sing, a cover of a Taylor Swift song, but like arrange
Mhm.
it yourself and things like that. So that's what I was into
Right.
back in the day. And then I started YouTube properly in July 2017.
2017.
Mm.
So not didn't take as long as it's taken other people to gain to where you are today. And I see you still are interested in the acoustics. I see them on your Instagram stories a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to incorporate it a bit more into the channel, but yeah.
Mhm. What sparked your interest in YouTube? Was it just the acoustics, like seeing other people's videos?
Yeah, pretty much that. Like, I have a general policy that whenever I see something cool, I kind of ask myself, you know, could I possibly create something like that? So
Right.
this kind of started with this YouTube acoustic stuff, but then also things like I really enjoy reading like articles about life advice, stuff like that. So the acoustic was kind of it was always in the back of my mind, and it was always in the back of my mind that this would be something really cool to do. And I had a few friends who were singers who were incredible, and I always fancied myself as the sort of guy who can learn a skill quite quickly and pick up stuff very
Hmm.
quickly. So I thought it would be really cool if I could be the guy to play the instruments. My very talented friends could sing the songs, and we'd have some kind of synergy that way.
Hmm. How did you eventually come to creating medicine study related YouTube videos from acoustics?
Um, so I think when I decided to start YouTube properly in 2017, I was on my medical elective. So that means we spend a few months going wherever in the world we want and doing medical stuff. So I was in Cambodia doing this plastic surgery like rotation thing. And while I was there, I started watching vloggers on YouTube. Like that was my first introduction to Casey Neistat, who's obviously
Hmm.
enormous in the vlogging community. And before that, I'd never really realized that vlogging as a concept was a thing. But
Right.
then when I started watching those again, that thing was in the back of my mind that, how hard would this really be to do myself, at least who do this whole medical vlogging stuff? There's
Hmm.
quite a few people in the US that do it, but I think the American style of content creation is very different to the British style of content creation. So,
True.
like, I thought that there was a gap in the market, in inverted commas. And after that, I kind of realized that actually no one really cares about a vlog unless they care about you as a person. And
Hmm.
from what I discovered by reading around the subject, people start to care about you as a person when you can teach them stuff. Because people are only really on YouTube for either education or entertainment. And I
Right.
felt that my personality, I felt, was not very entertaining. Like I didn't have the big, I wasn't loud, I wasn't particularly funny. But what I could do is I could educate people about a lot of things. So I thought that would be the avenue that I would go down.
Yeah, I imagine that there's going to be a recurring theme in upcoming episodes too, where people say that there's a gap in the market that they saw and they ended up filling it, because that's kind of what Elliot was also talking about in terms of he saw no videos at his university, so that's how he kind of gained traction.
Yeah.
Um, I also noticed there's like a very like positive vibe that's like something noticeable in your videos. Obviously, everybody has bad days. Do you still make videos, or do you kind of like hold off until you're feeling genuine?
Um, I don't know. This is gonna sound weird, but I don't really have bad days. And like
Really?
I sometimes say this to my mom, and she doesn't believe me. She thinks that I'm putting on a facade because really I'm damaged inside or something like that, and therefore I'm trying to kind of give off this impression that everything is all sunshine and butterflies and roses. But
Right.
actually, for the most part, by the grace of God, my life has been pretty much sunshine and butterflies and roses, and I haven't really had any
Hmm.
major setbacks. I don't have any major health issues. Don't have anything massively bad going
Hmm.
on. And I think that combined with my just general personality of being quite a chill guy, but also all the stuff I've read about things like stoicism and how, a lot of stress are just completely pointless causes of stress, things like that just makes me a generally positive person. And I don't think I really have to put on anything when I make a video other than
Hmm.
just slightly increase the volume of my voice, slightly be a bit more enthusiastic, which everyone does when they're on camera.
Right, right. Wow, no bad days. That's something I would like to take if you could, share some.
Yeah, man, read
Um,
Happy by Darren Brown. It's a great book. Really good
Happy
book.
by Darren Brown.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely gonna read
Or
that.
The
Add that
Guide
to
to
my
the Good
list.
Life by William Irvine. That's another fantastic
Right.
one about stoicism.
Have you seen Charlie? He was on one of the S series videos where he used to be like a music mogul, but he was really overweight and depressed. And then basically he became a Nike athlete, and now he talks about things like quantum energy, like if you think about something and it'll attract you. Like he wanted to work for Oprah. I'm probably butchering the story, but he wanted to work for Oprah or something like that. And then he thought about it in the morning. He told his friend, and literally as he's telling his friend, a manager for Oprah walks in and wants to do an interview with him on his story of becoming a Nike athlete. So
Oh,
it's kind of similar to this whole thing of stoicism. Which video of yours do you really think kind of took off like the most to start gaining you traction?
the first one that to really take off was when I did my evidence-based study tips video
Hmm.
about active recall and the evidence around that.
Right.
So that kind of took the channel from 4,000 to about 20,000 subscribers in the space of a few weeks. And then after that, it was the iPad Pro video, how I take notes on my iPad Pro, and that
Yeah, that's how I
suddenly
found you.
found it like, yeah, just reached a mainstream audience that way, which was pretty awesome.
Hmm. I see active recall is like a huge thing in your channel. How did you actually learn about it? Because I see you're teaching it to a lot of people now.
Yeah, so we had a lecture in our second year of medical school. Towards the end, it was about the psychology of learning, and it introduced things like active recall, spaced repetition, and a few other techniques. And at the end of that lecture, me and all my friends were all like, "Oh my God," our minds were completely blown. We were like, "How have we never learned this? Why has no one ever taught this stuff to us? Why couldn't they have taught this to us in our first year of medical school or even in
Right.
secondary school?" Um, and then because I've always had like popular psychology as an interest, and I studied it for my third year subject because when we do med school in the UK, it's a 6 year degree, but in your third year, you can do whatever you want, really. So I chose to do psychology, started giving some talks at the university about how to prepare for exams, and those became quite
Right.
popular. And I realized that this is something that no one really ever teaches you. So one of the first few things that I was thinking when I started my YouTube channel was at some point, once I've got a decent backlog of content, I want to make like a really well produced video about evidence-based study tips. And
Hmm.
even like 8 months before that video came out, I was kind of working towards that being like a viral hit. Because I
Hmm.
don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk.
Of course I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course you are. If you have a podcast, then you're bound to be. But his thing, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard, is that it only takes one piece of content to change your life, but you never
Yes.
know what piece of content that's going to be.
Right.
And in addition to that, there were a few things that I learned from people like Sarah Dietschy and Casey Neistat, which
Hmm.
were along the lines that it's really important to have a backlog of content that's good, such that when you get a viral video, then people realize that there's something more behind it rather than just the viral video. So I had this in the back of my mind for between like July 2017 and April 2018 when that video came out. And I was thinking that, okay, everything is working towards that one video about study tips. And
Hmm.
everything went according to plan, which was awesome. But then this iPad video completely took off and I just was not expecting it to. So that was like out
Hmm.
of the blue.
Right. Wow, that's really cool. You mentioned Casey Neistat, Sarah Dietschy, and Gary Vaynerchuk. Who do you take
Mm.
inspiration from? There definitely aren't as many, as you said, medicine study YouTubers in the UK as there are vloggers, filmmakers, and pranksters. So who do you kind of take inspiration from?
Actually, I think my biggest inspiration for my own style has been two different people. So there's Peter McKinnon, who I'm
Hmm.
sure you're familiar with, a
Yes.
massive YouTuber, 3 million subscribers in less than 2 years, incredible like photography, videography tutorials.
Hmm.
His style of delivery was, I mean, like in the photography community, he was the first channel to break 1 million subscribers because the style of
Oh.
delivery was just so good, and he was such a likable personality. So I found myself trying to emulate a lot of what he was doing in his videos, but in my own kind of British toned down, you know, semi posh kind of fashion. But also
Right.
there's this far less well known YouTuber called Simon Clark, and he was a physics student at Oxford University
Hmm.
about like 8 years ago, and then he did a PhD at Exeter University in the UK, and he was kind of the original UK university vlogger, and he set up this program at Oxford that was all about getting students every year to vlog about their journey of being at Oxford, and helping people from non-traditional backgrounds see that this is an achievable aim. Anyway, so his all of his content was very much the kind of style that I thought I would be like, quite, to use the word posh, quite like, high. I don't want to say highbrow, more like an educated style of
Right.
content creation rather than,
Hmm.
pranks and comedy and, the more, that side of
Mainstream.
YouTube.
Right.
Yeah. So and he had over 100,000, like 80,000 subscribers or something at the time. He's now got like 160 or something like that. And I remember thinking that, wow, this guy shows that someone like me, i.e., who's basically a nerd, can actually do well on YouTube. And that was a big source of inspiration.
Right. You mentioned one of his side projects. I know you also have your own SixMed. Maybe tell us about that for those who don't know.
Yeah, so SixMed is a company that me and some of my friends set up when we were in our second year of university. So it's a 6-year degree. Yeah, so in our second year, around 2013, I kind of came up with the idea of running courses for people applying to medical school. So taking the exams like the BMAT and the UK CAT, which is sort of similar to stuff that you do in the US, like the MCAT and the GAMSAT or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and because I'd done reasonably well in one of these exams and I had friends who did well in the others, we thought, how hard would it really be to create a course? And it kind of started as a very small time thing, running a course at our local at our old secondary school. But then because I also had a background in web design and coding, the natural progression was, hang on, why don't I just make a website and advertise this nationally, and we'll see if there's any interest. And because we priced our courses like, a fifth of the price of the next big competitor, I thought that, we'll at least get some students and make a bit of money in the summer holidays. So it started
Hmm.
off as a very small time thing, but then that just grew and grew each year to the point where we're now teaching over 1,000 students a year, and we've got these online courses and online question banks and all this sort of stuff, which is pretty cool.
So I know in one of your recent articles you said that your SixMed it doesn't take that much time of yearly like admin work. But
Mm.
how do you like balance it with your YouTube and medicine, obviously school, or now your job? How do you balance all of this?
So the nice thing about SixMed is that at this point, it's become a very good lifestyle business. So
Hmm.
the classic 4-hour work week. And like I was working this out for last year, and actually I put in far less than 4 hours a week into SixMed stuff because it's now at the point where a lot of the work is being done by friends of mine. I've hired medical students in the years below to do all the teaching. I had a friend of mine and a freelancer from the Philippines to deal with all the emails. So what I do is just kind of general overseeing and pulling the strings from behind the scenes, whereas all the
Right.
work is done by everyone else. And I think it was Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, that really sold this
Hmm.
idea to me about like 7 years ago when I read it. But that was always in the back of my mind when I made SixMed, that ultimately, if this does go big, I want to turn it into a business where it doesn't require my input to succeed. So it was therefore quite easy to run it while working and running the YouTube channel. It took a hell of a lot of time in the first 2 or 3 years,
Hmm.
um, of course. But as a medical student, people think that it's very time intensive. But I think once I got introduced to these effective study techniques, I didn't need to spend much time actually studying. So I had a lot of time to work on these other things like SixMed.
Oh wow, it's really interesting that you say medical students don't like their schedules aren't as jam-packed as people think, because that's something that I myself do think. Um, for example, I know a lot of friends who are debating between engineering and medicine, and a lot of the time the reason they don't want to do medicine is like they have a passion for medicine, but not to the point where they'd want to spend 12 years in school, spending 24 hours a day or 20 hours a day learning about it.
Hmm.
So what do you have to say about that, about like the 12 years? Do you ever like have maybe lose your patience or things like that?
I think perhaps the comparison is a bit unfair because I think the impression I get is that medical school in the US is a lot more kind of pressured than medical school in the UK. But
I
then
see.
even in the UK, people applying to medicine have been fed this myth that, oh my God, if you're a medical student, you have to work so hard, you have to work like 12 hours a day for the rest of your life and like all this sort of stuff. Um, and I don't know if if at Cambridge it was just a different experience, but we only had like 2 lectures a day, occasionally three, just like 3 hours. Occasionally
Hmm.
we'd have a lab practical maybe twice a week, which was another 2 hours. And like after those 5 hours, you had the rest of your time completely to yourself. And yeah, we had to write a few essays each week, but again, because you have so much time left in the day, like you sleep for 8 hours or 7 hours, you're in
Wow.
lectures for 5 hours, that makes 12. You've got another 12 hours to do whatever the hell you want. And that is ample time. 12 hours a day is a hell of a long
Yeah.
time. I mean, that's not even including the weekends, where you just have to write a couple of essays and have a social life. And it's amazing. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
can never really sympathize when people say that, oh my God, medical school is so hard, because that wasn't the experience that I had. Like it was hard, sure, but it wasn't very time intensive, if that makes sense. Perhaps it's
It
different in the
does.
US. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's different because that sounds like less work than what high schoolers and middle schoolers do here with their like lectures for what like 6 7 hours a day and then more homework and then people end up sleeping like 4 hours because of how much time they waste. But yeah, that's really interesting.
No, I think it's interesting.
See,
What you just said is that people end up sleeping 4 hours because of how much time they waste. So
yeah,
like obviously like in the UK in secondary school as well, it's from 8 in the morning till 3:30 in the evening, and you've
right.
got some homework to do. But I think even back then, a lot of us just wasted so much time, like doing pointless stuff and scrolling Facebook and browsing through like Snapchat or Instagram or MSN, wwhatever it was back in the day, that even in
Right.
school there was just so much spare time to do loads of stuff. And I remember when I was younger, I used to kind of be amazed at I was always interested in what people did with their spare time, and like I'd ask people in my class that, oh, so what do you do, like, well, what does your routine look like when you get home? I'm like, well, I
Hmm.
get home about 5 o'clock, and then I have dinner, and that takes me to about 6. And then I suppose I kind of watch TV for a bit, that takes me to about 8, and then I kind of chat to people on Facebook, and then I sleep at 11. And it felt to me even then that there's this whole like 6 7 hours that we have every evening, and
Hmm.
that seems like a total waste of that time. But yeah.
Right. Do you kind of employ your own like kind of Thomas Frank
Yeah.
the do you have your own kind of like to-do list and time management schedules and things like that?
Sort of. I sort of have a to-do list. I use the app Things, and I read this book called GTD, Getting Things Done, which is like this
Hmm.
productivity system that you may have come across. I don't really use a to-do list that often.
Right.
The main thing that I do is that every day I kind of think, what do I want to get done today? And I try
Hmm.
and just keep that to one thing. So like yesterday, for example, it was I just want to make this video about these 3 books that changed my life, and I made that video by the end of the day. I procrastinated a hell of a lot for the rest of the day, but that was the one thing that I had to do that day, and therefore it was
Right.
fine. Today, the one thing I need to do this evening is edit that video and edit another one, and once that's done, then that's my thing. So because I only have that with this 1 or 2 things to do, I can just store them in my head. But I suppose I should be using some kind of to-do list and stuff properly.
Right.
I don't know.
Hmm. Um, do you see yourself being able to make videos in 4 to 5 years when maybe your career is like really taking off or you're a lot more busy with patients and things like that?
Yeah, because one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that I want to build my career in a way that I'm still able to make videos in 4, 5, even 10 years time, and I want this to be a very long-term, sustainable activity. So again, like with medicine in the UK, there is this thing where if you go down a competitive training pathway, then your time gets taken up and all this, but there are also other ways that you can progress within medicine. And one thing that I think I want to do is I want to, for example, work part-time rather than full-time. That'll give me plenty of time on the side. I also want to take several years out of, studying a lot of like being a doctor in the UK to go around the world and do medical stuff abroad. And hopefully, my side passive income will sustain me while I'm doing that, and I'll be able to make videos. So I have this general plan that I don't want to be the sort of doctor that spends, 18 hours a day in the hospital, because I don't think that's a good lifestyle to have.
Hmm. Of course. Right, that makes a lot of sense. What advice do you have for people struggling either to gain a following or to simply find their own niche, like finding content to create?
Okay, so let's deal with the second one first. So finding content to create is the most important thing, and the one piece of advice I would have is teach what you know. So there is a book called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, which is really, really good, and that kind of changed the game for me when I first read it in 2016. And the idea behind that is that even if you're not an expert, like I don't consider myself an expert on anything. I didn't do that amazingly in my exams or anything like that, but I can still teach what I know to people who would value that. And everyone who wants to create content has something about the world that they know that they can teach other people. So
Right.
kind of like, and also kind of like what Gary Vee says, document, don't create. Like documenting the process of learning something versus thinking that you have to create content, because creating content is hard, whereas documenting or teaching is relatively straightforward because you've done it already and you're just telling people what you've done. So
Right.
that's always the advice that I give to my friends these days when they're like, oh, I'm thinking of starting a blog, thinking of starting a YouTube channel. Start with educational content based around things that you know you can do, and then
Hmm.
you can think about branching out later. And then in terms of growing an audience, to be honest, a lot of it is about just churning out quantity rather than quality at the beginning. Like, just showing up every single week, creating a video, creating 2 videos, writing a blog post every single week without fail. And over time, as Sarah Deitch and Casey Neistat say, over time your library of content builds up, and at that point you don't really care if no one is reading your stuff. Like I had a blog for like 2 years before anyone started reading it, and people only started reading it because my YouTube channel started to take off.
Right.
But had I, been writing a blog post a week, I would have had like 200 blog posts on my website by this time. And then when you get that one viral hit, that's when people start to care. So I think at the start, you want to completely forget about the fact that you're trying to grow an audience and just focus on churning out the content. And the more of it you churn
Right.
out, eventually you'll get that one piece of content that changes your life, as Gary Vee says.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So also you have a lot of things. You seem like a very well-rounded person with singing and SixMed and medicine and filmmaking. Oh, speaking of filmmaking, I see that you've mentioned a lot of like interest in like kind of filmmaking photography, like Sam Colder style of videos. How did that come about?
So the interest in the Sam Colder style of videos came because I saw one of his videos and I was just completely blown away by how amazing it was.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen any of his videos.
No,
Like
I've
they're
seen a
just
lot of them. I've seen
yeah,
all of
they're
them.
just absolutely next level. I'm like
Right.
everything he does. I'm like, how the hell? Like this is
Yeah,
just amazing.
exactly.
Um, so then I kind of had this vision that wouldn't it be really cool to become like a medical travel vlogger or something like that? But I think now actually I've kind of gone off that a bit because I recognize that my strengths really are not in this, having this lifestyle where I'm like traveling the world and doing backflips and showing off my six pack and kind of going
Mhm.
off cliffs and stuff and filming it all in amazing quality with drones and things. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the value add for me personally. So kind of the route I want to go down is this more. I still haven't come across the style, but maybe more of a so like for example, last month I went to Sudan for this like 5 day medical
Right, I
project
saw.
thing, and
Hmm.
I filmed all the footage for that. Now I could turn that into like a super high pace, like bang 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 with like epic beating music in the background, but that just doesn't really feel like my style. So instead, I'm probably going to do a bit where I'm talking to the camera, narrating the experiences of this trip, explaining a bit of the medical stuff as we go along, and then
Right.
overlaying footage on top of that. So kind of more of that style of travel vlog rather than
Like
the Sam
reflections.
Calder cinematic style.
Hmm. Right,
But
that
yeah,
makes sense. And what about photography? How did that come about? I see you talk you mentioned a lot about your A6000, your Sony
yeah,
A6000.
yeah.
How you
Why
bring it a
do I
lot?
forgot? That's like the biggest, most valuable purchase I've ever made in my life.
Right.
So I bought the A6000 when I was in my fourth year of med school. That's when we start
Hmm.
going to hospitals and things. Because my brother had one of these like Nikon DSLRs for years and years. And one day on Facebook, one of those, 5 years ago, this is a memory you were tagged in, that one of those came up. And I saw a
Hmm.
photo that my brother had taken 5 years ago of me and some of my cousins who were really young at the time. And it was in really good quality. And I was like, oh my God, this photo is sick. And like to be able to look back on that in 5 years' time and then projecting into the future in like 10, 20 years' time would just be amazing. And it was
Hmm.
just, completely worlds apart from, a crappy phone photo, even though iPhone photos are really good these days. They're just still not the same as the creamy
The
bokeh you get with
DSLR
like
is right.
with like a decent camera. So pretty much that evening I messaged my brother saying, look, what camera should I get? He recommended the A6000. And from that point on I started taking it everywhere. And every year I made like a Facebook album for like fourth year,
Hmm.
fifth year, sixth year of medical school, to just taking the camera to every kind of social gathering, every dinner, every party that I went to, just taking loads of photos. And now it's become a thing that I look back on and think this is just incredible. And there's no one else really in my year who has such a high quality document of their time at university. And
Right.
I feel really happy whenever I look through these photos. And then, of course, once you have a camera, you might as well learn a bit about photography. You might as well start watching YouTube tutorials about it. And then eventually, when you start taking some landscape shots, then you start calling yourself a photographer. And I'm like, I don't know, like these days, I still wouldn't call myself a photographer. I was
Hmm.
thinking about that this morning while I was listening to this other podcast that, why don't I call myself a photographer? I guess just because I feel like I'm not doing it properly because I'm not like a Peter McKinnon or like a,
Hmm.
National Geographic photographer traveling the world. But, I have a camera, I take photos.
Right.
Why not call myself a photographer?
Why not? Do you think for you it's more about the memories or more about like the image quality?
I think it's about the memories, but the image quality helps with the memories. So,
True.
there is something so nice about a candid smiling photo of your friends from 3 years ago that looks really, really, really well done compared to, a selfie taken with an iPhone, or like even that same photo taken with an iPhone. It just doesn't quite have that same like,
Hmm.
creaminess to it. So
Right.
I think
Um,
I think picture quality does matter.
One thing I've noticed was when you were talking about the albums that you create after fifth and sixth year, my friends and I have been doing this thing, like my best friend since high school began. We've been like we meet a lot, right? So we just take pictures of everywhere we go. Maybe sometimes we'll go hiking or we'll go camping and we'll like take pictures. And sometimes we'll bring along like DSLRs. And I noticed there's like a big story behind the DSLRs. So like in one image, I'll put it up on the screen right now for the video. We were trying to take this picture of us balancing on a log, and it took us like at least 10-15 minutes just because all of us would fall off right as the camera would click to take the picture. And so that in itself, like the memory of like the setting up the photo and things like that is almost as good as like the memory of the photo itself as compared to
Yeah,
just like selfies of us.
yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's one of the things that I really love about photography. That, let's say you're on a trip with friends, and like there's no incentive for you to wake up at sunrise to see the sunrise. But if you want to take a photo of it, then suddenly you make the effort to.
Hmm.
Or for example, if you want to, for example, when I was in Sudan, me and this friend that I made there, we climbed up this like mountainy thing just so we could get a drone shot of the pyramids, which we wouldn't have
Hmm.
done if we didn't have that thing of having the camera around. I think having the camera is, as you said, it becomes a crutch for making memories in real life, which is another really good benefit of it.
Right, right. Let's see. Do you think have you ever had like second thoughts? I know a lot of YouTubers have talked about like when their channel slows down, they almost want to stop and things like that. Have you ever had that?
Oh, it's funny these questions that you're asking because this is pretty much exactly what I talked about in the video I filmed yesterday. Um,
Ah, okay.
so when it comes to having second thoughts, yeah, like the channel slows in growth whenever I don't make an iPad video that month. Um, and occasionally I think, oh, it's lost growth. But I mean, I'm at the point where it's as you said, it's on 140,000 subscribers, which is a number that I could never have believed if like
Hmm.
even like when I started YouTube a year and whatever a bit ago. So it's already exceeded my expectations so far that I just I don't have this drive that, oh my God, this channel needs to keep on growing. And
Hmm.
there's a really good book called Anything You Want by a guy called Derek Sivers, who I came across on the Tim Ferriss Show
Hmm.
podcast. And in that he talks about, how he set up this company and how he eventually sold it. But actually while he was running this company, a really big aim for him was to keep it small, to keep it sustainable, keep himself having fun. And he was kind of arguing against the standard startup philosophy of growth at all costs. And his point was, beyond a certain point, why do you care about growth? I mean, sure, it's going to make you a bit more money, but like in, at least for me, like money isn't really a limiting factor in my life. It's not like I would change anything if I suddenly became 20 times richer, because I have everything I want. I have a good job. I
Right.
have fun on the side, and therefore, as long as you're happy doing this thing, why do you care about the numbers, about the growth? I think a lot of the whole burnout from YouTube comes from caring too much about the numbers, about the algorithm, about, oh, I have to post 3 times a week, otherwise the algorithm's not going to favor me, all this
Hmm.
stuff. So whenever I even come close to thinking that, I just go back and read some of my Kindle highlights from that particular book. And it makes me think, you know what? Everything is all good. This is amazing. I'm going to enjoy the journey.
Right. So two things I just realized from what you said. One thing made me remember something that I was reading a while back that I'm not sure what the conversion is, but $75,000 US as an annual income. Apparently, the more you get past that, it doesn't really affect your happiness. But then once you reach a limit past even that, it starts decreasing your happiness. So people with, say, $1 million a year annual salary actually were more depressed than people who just made $100,000 and were doing things that they liked. And another thing that see, another thing that I realized from what you said is it kind of sounded a little bit like minimalism, where you said if even if you were like 20 times richer, it wouldn't change the style of your life. Have you maybe incorporated any kind of minimalism into your life?
Yeah, definitely. I probably wouldn't use the word minimalist to describe myself because looking around, I do have a lot of stuff. But actually, since I discovered like Matt Diavella, who
Matthew
you're
Weller,
familiar
right?
with, of course,
Yep.
and the minimalists before then. Actually, the first time I discovered this minimalism thing, I think was on an episode of the Tim Ferriss show, and then I started following the minimalists. And on one of their podcasts, they just mentioned this guy Matt Diavella, and at the time he had like 180 subscribers. So I was like his
Oh wow.
181st subscribers, and at the time he was just making these like random videos about how he made that documentary, and then suddenly he started like massively taking off, and I was like, what the hell? How?
Right.
And that like as a side note, that his journey is kind of a true testament to the idea that if you just produce really, really good, high quality content, then people will find it. And he didn't have to do any kind of growth hacky stuff or anything like that. He just produced really good content consistently, and after a year of doing it, it started to take off. But kind of reading, like I spent a few days when I was supposed to be on one of my medical placements, just binging through all of the different posts on the minimalist.com. And then I found all these other like simple living, minimalist living, Zen habits, all these other blogs that I
Right.
still follow to this day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always had a kind of minimalist attitude in that if I don't need something, I will quite happily throw it away. And this is a point that my family and I often, contend on, where I'm saying to my mum, look, we've just got too much stuff in the house. We need to get rid of it. And she's all like, no, but we might need it, just in case, or we
Right.
spent so much money on this, we're not getting rid of it. And, stuff
Right.
like
I
that.
feel like that's the barricade for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like now that I've got my own place, I try and live by that thing that if something is not bringing me value and it's not getting regular use, then I will quite happily chuck it away or give it to charity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. We're going over the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. Last question. Again, I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned, you seem like a very well-rounded person in terms of music and YouTube and medicine. What do you say about playing to your strengths and kind of letting go of a lot of things so you can focus on maybe what you're good at?
I think this is quite a popular way of going about it. I think overall, especially in medicine, people are too, actually just in general, people are too focused on specialization. Um, Perhaps in the past, where success was achieved by being super specialized in a single field and working your way to the top of the corporate ladder, and then just focusing on doing what you're good at, that was a formula for success, and it still is for some people. For example, Michael Phelps, clearly just focuses on that one thing that he's really good at. But
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of us that aren't going to become, top five in the world at anything, and I'm certainly not going to become top five in the world at anything, but becoming top 20% in the world of about five or six different things suddenly opens up all of the different possibilities. So I think in Peter Thiel's book Zero to One, he talks about this. He talks about how a lot of zero to one leaps, like a lot of kind of change and progress, comes from people becoming reasonably specialized in one particular field, but then also having other interests, and they recognize things from those other interests and apply it to their field. Like the printing press was invented because some guy happened to have an interest in that and also happened to be like a tailor on the side and used some knowledge from weaving to apply it to ink, and suddenly the printing press was created, and that was like the biggest invention before the internet. um,
Mm-hmm.
Equally, I think as doctors, a lot of really cool inventions are made because there is a doctor who happens to also have a background in engineering or in coding or something, and then they can use those different skills, combine them to make something cool. So kind of long story short, I think there is something to be said for focusing on your strengths, but overall it's quite it's a lot easier to become the like top 10, top 20% in something than it is to become top two people in the world at anything, because of the
Right.
significant diminishing returns you get when you're putting time into it. And it's just really fun being a jack of all trades. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can pick up the guitar and start playing, pick up the piano and start playing. Yeah, I'm not amazing at either of them, but I think I have just as much fun as people who are really good at one of them, if that makes sense. So that's
Right.
something I always advocate for people whenever they're asking me for advice, that just try and, like, you've got your main thing, you've got your study, you've got your education, you've got your medicine degree or engineering degree, but do other stuff on the side, because it won't seem like it right now, but in the future, you'll be a far more valuable addition to any team that you're part of, and you'll be far more set up to start your own thing if you have these side interests that are running concurrently.
Right. A lot of books were mentioned in this episode. So off the top of your head, what are your three favorite, like most life-changing books or most helpful?
Oh, conveniently, the video I made yesterday is called Three Books That Changed My Life. Those are
Right.
number one, The 4 Hour Work Week, number two, Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, and number three, Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. And all
Right.
three of them, I think we mentioned in this already.
Okay, I'm gonna put a links in the description for all the books that were mentioned in this video. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I had a lot of fun talking to you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Right, of course. And I'll see you guys all in the next episode.
Bye.